Well, welcome back to another special edition of the Lamppost Listener. My name is Daniel.
I'm Phil.
And this is a podcast where we are going to be wrapping up our coverage of the C.S. Lewis International Symposium 2019.
A lakeside chat, if you will.
This is easily the best place we've ever recorded. Yeah. We are sitting on a balcony in rocking chairs overlooking Lake Susan.
With the wonderful fall colors of Montreat, North Carolina on the mountain in front of us.
Yeah, this is a really... This means nothing to any of our listeners.
We're describing a visual,
and they can now picture.
They're hallucinating vividly.
We have a lot to talk about. We had an incredible evening last night. Let's start with Douglas Gresham's talk about bringing Narnia to the screen. So William O'Flaherty sat down with Douglas Gresham and kind of did a little bit of a Q&A, talking about the different iterations of Narnia on the screen. And so we can talk through a little bit about that. We should go ahead and just say up front, there was really no new news about the Netflix adaptations.
Yeah, for some reason we thought that maybe this is where they would announce or drop a trailer or something.
No, you didn't.
We thought it was a very, very slim possibility. Well, I didn't, but you did, and you talked about it a lot.
True.
I didn't want to call you out, but that's what happened.
No, I didn't.
We were hoping it wouldn't happen.
I didn't think we'd get much news on that front. I don't. As much as I have loved our time here, I don't know if Netflix is extremely excited to drop giant bombshells at a conference of 500 C.S. Lewis listeners. I think that's more of a Hollywood type thing. We started off by hearing about Douglas Gresham and some of the books. He spoke a little bit about the books at first. He said that his favorite Narnia book is whichever one he is currently reading. He says he reads them all the time as he prepares for different scripts that come across his desk, whether it's adaptations on the stage or he just actually said he gets just a lot of scripts, even new scripts for Narnia books, which he says he does not like. So anyone out there writing the 8th Narnia book, it sounds like Douglas Gresham just wants you to give up.
Cut it out.
Yeah. So he also mentioned that one of his favorite characters is Reepicheep in both the books and films. He said he really loved the way that they adapted him in the Hollywood movies. He then went on and he talked very highly of the actors who played the Pevensies. He talked quite a bit about some stories from their time on set. He spoke very highly of William Moseley, who played King Peter, and just kind of his character off the screen, and that he was just a wonderful man. He said that Skander was a troublemaker on set, and that he then told us kind of what Georgie Henley and Anna, is it Popplewell? Is that how you say her last name? You don't know. Why am I asking you? That she is now married to another actor, and just some of the anecdotes he gave her, just, be careful because he's an actor, kind of thing.
Don't marry another actor because you'll never be able to tell if he's lying.
Yeah.
And then she did. He said, but I think it worked out.
Yeah. So the next thing that William asked him was about the 1979 CBS adaptation, and Gresham's response to, were you at all involved in that production was, oh no, he was definitely not involved in it. And then he did walk it back a little bit, and he said that it was good for its time. It wasn't his favorite, but he said they were really limited by the budget.
This is a common thread throughout discussions about fantasy in general. We talked to someone who made a film about a George MacDonald story, and it's just hard to do fantasy because the special effects are not there if you are in the 80s or before, and then if you're later, it's expensive, and the budget has to be there.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think we're getting to a place where people are recognizing that. They're like, it's not worth making if we don't have the special effects budget.
Yeah, and then he went on, he spoke about the BBC adaptations. He spoke a little bit higher of them, but still admitted that he didn't love them and thought they did a better job with the Hollywood take. And what I mean by that is the 3 movies from the early 2000s. But he said again, it was... He enjoys it for what it is, but just thought it was definitely lacking in some things, especially budget-wise.
Right. So I think that the BBC version was almost point for point exactly like the book, except for the fact that the special effects were just they're not there at all. And then the Disney ones, he really liked those, but he still is not going to be satisfied until we have every single thing that Lewis put in the books in the show. And I'm curious if that'll work. Like, of all the things that could be made into a point-by-point, exact one-to-one representation of the literary work, I think Narnia could do it but it's going to be hard to get the budget for that many things.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, so let's jump over the Hollywood stuff just for a second and talk about the Netflix stuff. He shared, he really didn't have much to share at all. He did say that he would prefer an episodic thing. That was his exact quote, an episodic thing. And then later he did say series. And he says if you were really he said two funny things. He said he would love it to literally be exactly the book. And then he said, and if you were really stupid, you could even add to it if they do a series. And I don't know if I necessarily agree that I would want a exact take on the book. I'm fine with adaptations. I don't know if I've talked about it enough on this show, but even with the Prince Caspian movie, I actually like some of the additions that they make. Now, some I really don't like, but I'm actually okay with adapting it because the screen and the page are two very different mediums. But he was very clear that's what he would want to see, would be almost an exact remake of what we have in the book.
Oh.
And he also said his preference would be that if they were to have the budget, which he said, he doesn't know about this, but he said he would actually prefer they just start from scratch. He doesn't want to, go back to the silver chair.
If the budget was big enough to do all of them,
mm-hmm.
he would.
So let's actually go back then and talk about the Disney and then the Fox, or I think it was Fox, right, that did Don Treader, those adaptations. He was mostly satisfied with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. He thought that was the best one that they did, and he said he fought a lot of battles and he felt like he won quite a few. I was pretty happy with the final outcome. And he reminded us that the rest of the world was too, if you look at the box office. Mm-hmm. He then went on to speak about Prince Caspian. He said he mostly liked it. He thought it was a relatively good adaptation. He did say he said it has some silly points, and he thought that the kiss between Caspian and Susan was quite a stupid thing to do, to quote him.
He also said people wrote him and asked how he could possibly allow that, and he said, I wasn't in charge.
Yeah, he said
I wasn't the director.
He gets so frustrated because he says he gets a lot of mail about that kiss. He's like, I literally had nothing to do with that. I'm not the director of the film. I'm just an executive producer.
He said my role is that of an advisor.
Yeah. And then he talked a bit about Don Treader. I think the best thing he had to say about it was that his favorite cameo is in it. Well, no, you haven't seen this movie, correct?
The Don Treader one?
Yeah.
I have not.
So I know there's not much we can talk about. He talked about, and for our listeners, he talked about the green mist, which you have no idea what we're talking about, Phil. He did not like that. And maybe we'll talk about that more when we cover the movie eventually. Oh. But he talked about really not being happy with the green mist that shows up in that film.
Yeah.
So that was about mostly what he covered. Do you have any other thoughts about that talk?
We did have one funny story.
Oh, yeah, tell us.
So this is the kind of person who answers a lot of the same questions over and over again. And you can tell because certain questions will trigger a certain story and he'll tell it. And we spent a good amount of time with him this weekend. Yeah. And the different speakers didn't necessarily hear each other speak. And then when they all got together,
he would retell some of the same stories. They're great stories.
They are. And he has every right to tell them again. It's just because we were everywhere, we heard the same story 3 times. But he had a girl ask him at some press conference, or not a press conference, but like some event similar to this, I suppose. And she said, "Did you film Aslan with a real lion?" And he said, "Yes, and it was a real tragedy because Lucy was originally played by twins, and I had to tell her parents that one of them had been eaten by a lion."
Yeah, he says, like, one of the hardest things I've had to do was write that letter to that mother. And he eventually was like, no, I told the girl, I was just joking. But he
said he pulled her aside, gave her a hug, and he said, I hear that question a lot. He said, it's okay, I hear that question a lot.
Yeah, I really enjoyed his sense of humor. He really, and he's a storyteller.
He is a storyteller.
It makes you just wonder what it was like to be in that household with Lewis and with Joy. And just this, and I'm sure a lot of that, I mean, some of that I think is his own just natural gifting, but I'm sure some of that comes from his upbringing. And I loved his stories. And I think we can then kind of transition this into the evening that we got to spend afterwards.
So this is a very special thing. We got invited to a much smaller group and got to spend time drinking scotch with the stepson of C.S. Lewis.
On the porch of the house that he's staying in here.
That's right. Yeah, it was freezing cold. Everyone went inside and got blankets, those that could find them, and others were just, they put up with it and drank some scotch.
Yeah, we're the lowly Narnia novices, so we did not have blankets.
But I do feel like we're on our way up.
We're getting there. So yeah, and special thanks to Justin Wiggins, the author of Surprised by Agape, who
Made
will
it
be
all
on.
happen.
Yeah, he'll be on the show soon as a guest. I'm not sure exactly when, but he'll eventually be on the show. Yeah, he invited us, and that was so kind and generous of him.
He's a generous guy and a humble guy,
Oh,
considering how much
so
good stuff
humble.
he's done.
Actually, even just walking there was quite a wonderful experience. So it was, I don't know, about 9 o'clock or so. We stayed there till almost midnight, I feel like. But we were walking through through this beautiful mountain scene. It was night, it was dark, and we were walking along the side of like this babbling brook with leaves kind of crunching on the ground. It was actually, I think it was raining a little bit outside too.
Little fall of rain.
And I was like, we're literally walking through Narnia to go hear stories about Jack.
Yep.
And it was one of my favorite moments of my entire life. Just I mean, even getting there, even once we got there, obviously I love that, but just walking there being like, I can't believe what we're about to go do.
That was a very exciting thing.
So we got to hear a lot about, Gresham just told lots of different stories, and I think we can share some of just the stuff that was there. One of my favorite things, though, outside of Doug's stories, where Dr. Jerry Root was there, and Doug would be telling a story, and he'd be like, "Oh, and it was the priest of Holy Trinity, or it was this chauffeur," and he would just say it, and Jerry would interrupt him for a second. "Oh, his name was so and so," and he's, "Oh, yes, that's right, that was his name," and it was funny because Doug's telling these stories of his life from 50 years ago, and Jerry, who Dr. Root,
who
has done all this research, is telling him all that, he's filling him in on all the gaps in his own life.
I wonder what that would be like to have someone know more about my life in the past than I do, or to know about someone close to me.
And that's what was
who never met him.
That was what was so interesting about the circle, because also Dr. Downing was there, and he was kind of filling him in on some stuff. And I think there were 4 people who are currently writing books about Lewis in this circle.
And everyone was so humble, but also like willing to share what they were working on, and bold enough to speak up. Everyone got a little interview about what they were working on, those that were writers, and it was fun to hear.
And many of them will be on the show in this season or upcoming seasons.
Yeah, so. And hopefully we'll be able to extract some of the stuff they've learned too.
One of my favorite stories that Doug told us last night was that so Lewis, and I actually didn't know this, and I have not actually read this book, but he was talking about a grief observed after Joy passed away. And I didn't realize this, but Lewis wrote it under a pseudonym. I didn't know that because now obviously you go to Barnes & Noble and it's got C.S. Lewis on it. And so he said that he wrote it under the pseudonym. And he's telling us the whole story of how he even came up with which name he was going to use and all that stuff. And so eventually it gets published under the pseudonym, and it ends up on bookshelves in Oxford. And he was saying that Lewis had just gone through this tragedy of losing his wife, and so many of his friends and coworkers from Oxford would go to the bookstore, and they would see this book and say, "Oh, Jack would really like this book. It'd really help him in this tough time." And so
they would send it to him.
Yeah, and Doug said around that season of their life, he would just go in every room, and there would be 20 copies of A Grief Observed.
Yeah. He said Jack never gave away a gift that he had received,
and
so they had 20 copies, put one in each room in the house.
When we got back to the room, I couldn't go to sleep.
Yeah, so just to paint that picture, it was after midnight, and I tried to turn the light out, and you insisted we turn it back on because there's no way you're going to sleep.
Yeah, I wasn't ready. I was just sitting there thinking, like, what an incredible opportunity. And, as I just reflect on our time yesterday and our time this morning, I'm really blown away by the humility of the group of people here. It's been so wonderful to meet all of these people who we've known through social media or through the podcast, but then to meet so many of them in person and just to have our ideas of them confirmed about how wonderful and humble and generous they are has really just been an incredible experience.
I think it's been really nice to share meals with people. You and I knew each other, but we didn't really know anyone else, at least in person, when we showed up here. And we knew a few people from the internet, and we did speak with them quite a bit, but we also just sat down and started talking. Now, we always had a common entry point. How did you first hear about Lewis? How did you hear about the conference? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So one example of something that's neat about a conference like this where you're here in person is that we sit down to dinner and we're having a conversation, and I turn to my right, and the person who just gave the lecture, Dr. Hal Poe, he's right there. And I was able to ask him a question because he had skipped quite a bit of his prepared talk, and I asked him about his thought process in doing that, and it led to this further discussion. And because you're exposed to a wide range of people, he was trained as a Baptist preacher, and he said, when I make a point, I just wave my hands around so that everyone knows that's what the point is. There are little nuggets like that all
that was
throughout
wonderful.
the weekend, and just being here in person is so different than watching a few lectures on YouTube or something.
And I know we need to wrap up our time here because we've got to hit the road.
Got a car to catch.
Yes, but I just think we really have to give a special thank you just to our patrons who've helped make this trip possible.
Who are increasing in number.
Yeah, we're very thankful for that. But even not just our patrons, but all of our listeners in general who support and have helped spread the show and made this more exciting for us. We very much want to act as surrogates for some of them who aren't able to be here and be able to experience just some of the richness and knowledge that we've been able to experience this weekend.
We took lots of
notes. Or
it's
not a weekend. Today's Friday.
That's right. The weekend has just begun.
Yeah.
We took lots of notes, and I think that it will continue to inform what we talk about.
You took lots of
next few years.
illustrations.
I took a lot of notes, and I drew a little bit too.
Yeah. I mean, this makes sense because you're an illustrator. But I would look over during so many of the lectures, and you would literally on like one side of the page have your notes, and the other side just the people sitting in front of us, or the person on the stage. You'd be doodling. Is that too is that not appropriate?
You're treading on some dangerous territory.
What do you say? You say drawing? Is that sketching?
Yeah, artisanal drawings. No, just drawings. I did draw the people in front of me a little bit. It does help to focus. Everybody has something like that, but I also tried to draw the people speaking because you had them far away, so you could draw them smaller, but you could also look at the screen for the bigger details. And I tried to capture how they looked when they were speaking, which is hard to do because they're constantly moving around. But I think that it'll really serve as a memory aid later on in a different way than, say, a photograph would or just notes.
Well, any last thoughts, Phil?
Not for me. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, my last thought, just gratitude. I'm so thankful to be here. I'm so thankful for our incredible listeners and especially our patrons who are supporting us over at Patreon. And yeah, I mean, this has just been a beautiful week, and I'm thankful for you and through our podcast and for the work of C.S. Lewis and thankful for just this gift that the Lord has given us. And it's been a great time. It
is truly a gift.
Yeah.
And I think that one big takeaway from this is that C.S. Lewis is still relevant today because he was speaking the truth, but he was speaking the truth about Jesus. So we talk a lot about how cool it was to meet people connected to C.S. Lewis, but C.S. Lewis connected us to the Lord. And some people he introduced us, and other people I think he just kind of reintroduced us or helped us clarify some thoughts on things. And I'm very grateful for his writing and just that his work exists.
Yeah, I don't think there's any other better way to end this little recap. So we'll be back to your regular scheduled programming before you know it.
See you soon.